Senator Lembke, you mentioned the points violation in the state statutes. How do the red light, besides that, how do red light violations caught on camera differ from those caught by, say, an on-scene police officer in terms of procedure and then also in terms of punishment?
Well, certainly when a police officer sees you run a red light and pulls you over and then writes you a ticket, you have the opportunity as an individual to face your accuser in a court of law. My understanding with the way the red light camera ticket works, first of all, you receive the ticket in the mail and you're asked to do what? First thing, to sign the ticket, incriminate yourself. Or if you're not going to incriminate yourself, you're asked to help law enforcement incriminate someone else. Okay? So that's certainly different. And then I guess it depends on the municipality across the state and the way they have written their ordinances. This is the issue in Springfield as far as how they were adjudicating these cases. You didn't have an opportunity to actually face your accuser, go into court, and plea your case. Okay? So I think that's the way they differ. I think, again, safety is how these things are being sold. And I think it was Ben Franklin that said any society that's willing to give up liberty for security will soon have neither liberty nor security. And my job as one of the senators elected in this state is to protect liberty. Matter of fact, it's in my job description. You go to Article 1, Section 2 of the Missouri Constitution, and it says, and I'll paraphrase, that it's my job to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the gain of your own industry. And when government fails to do that, I fail in its chief design. So I take that very seriously. I will not give up an inch of my constituent or Missourians' liberty for security.
So you mentioned that one of your chief concerns with the red light cameras, at least the ones in the city by and large, are that they don't record the drivers. So if the cameras did in fact record footage of the drivers, what constitutional issues would there be, or just other concerns would you have?
That, like I said previously, I mean, that would certainly relieve a lot of my heartburn with the cameras. Now, I think that we still have to deal with equal protection under the law. You can't have people committing the same crime and receiving a different penalty for that crime. So I think that, and I'm anxious to see how the Attorney General again responds to my request as far as the penalty that's attached to running a red light. So I'm not saying what the penalty should be. Currently, the statute says that 2 points should be issued, against the driver's license. We can debate, and the legislature can go back and say, well, this is, what we're going to attach as far as a penalty to a running a red light. Okay, what I'm saying is they shouldn't be different. They should be the same.
If it could be proven that the red light cameras did in fact reduce traffic accidents and that they're cost effective, would you support them?
With no other changes?
Well, with no other changes,
I would not support them. Yeah, if it was proven that there was a safety component, and again, my concern there is that when you look at some of these studies and they look at some of these intersections and they say that traffic accidents have gone down 33%, and you find out that the previous year there were 4 traffic accidents and this year there are 3. It's a little questionable, as far as the way those studies, are, taking that information and then selling it to the public.
And what's the process in terms of review of the videotapes? How do police officers, or how do you actually get a ticket? Is there a police officer reviewing the camera footage?
My understanding is it does go to a police officer, and the police officer actually views, and then he signs the ticket saying that he witnessed you go through the light, I would contend that the officer's committing perjury at that point. Because he did not see you drive that vehicle through the red light. He saw the vehicle and the license plate go through the red light, but he has no idea who's driving that vehicle.
And if you could face the police officer who signed that ticket in court and were given a fair trial, would that solve some of these issues?
Well, it certainly, you know, again, would alleviate, you know, some of my concerns as far as the way these are handled.
What solutions besides cameras do you think there might be for reducing running red lights or just other traffic violations?
Well, one of the things that I'm looking at in my office is acquiring information both from MoDOT and from other states is the length of yellow lights. I mean, I think it's important for us to look at that. I think it's, you know, there's certainly a safety component there. I'm not sure what the timing is where, you know, you lose your safety component, but certainly we're going to look at that. We're going to look at studies that have been done, and if this is something where I can get around my colleague in the Senate and we can maybe introduce a piece of legislation that won't be legislating red light cameras, it'll be more legislating, you know, red lights or, you know, traffic lights, then that might be a way that we can address this.
Okay. And why do you think it's so important for citizens to oppose the use of red light cameras?
Well, again, you know, I think it's important for us to be vigilant as far as looking out for our liberties. I don't think that we should trust our government. I think that we ought to hold our government responsible for their duty to serve us, you know, and not the other way around. So, you know, I talked to a group of Boy Scouts last night, and they asked some very good questions, but they wanted me to speak on the topic of who gives us our rights, and then what is our responsibility as citizens, good citizens, you know, to live our lives out and you know, practice, you know, living in a free society, you know, that has liberty and freedom. And, you know, it's interesting, a few of the hands went up when I asked who gives you your rights, and they said, you know, a few of them said government. And of course we all know that government does not give us our rights. Our rights are given to us by our Creator, and then government is put in place to secure those rights. And so government works for us, not the other way around.
Thank you. Alderman French. So you mentioned two different motivations for using the cameras. Is any one of those a stronger conviction for you in terms of using the cameras for deterrence or using them in prosecution?
If I had to weigh the two, I would say using them in prosecution. I think the biggest need is to get those people who are causing these crimes, and especially the murderers, off the street. I mean, these are folks, in many cases, who are the same, either themselves or their groups, small gangs, or the same guys doing it over and over again, and it's in everybody's best interest to get those guys off the street. And
you mentioned the high crime rate in your district. How much of that crime is committed in public places? I
don't have statistics, but unfortunately, most of these murders that happen and these shootings do happen in public places. A lot of these are drive-bys. A lot of these are, you know, the three murders that happened about 3 weeks ago on Lee over a 3-day period all happened on the street. 2 of them happened in broad daylight. And these are all in areas that would have been captured in the surveillance cameras.
And if the cameras were meant as a deterrent, or if potential criminals saw them as a deterrent, would they just move to other areas where they knew there were not cameras? In other words, is putting cameras in your district placing a burden on other neighborhoods where there aren't cameras?
It is a possibility. I mean, it is very likely that they will just move their activity somewhere else. You know, what I'm charged with is trying to clean up this area. And just like speeding, or, you know, there are sections of the city where, you know, speeders know that they can drive pretty fast and not get caught. Likewise, unfortunately, there are sections of the city where folks feel more comfortable shooting in broad daylight than other sections. My goal is to make sure that this area in Penrose and O'Fallon, where right now people feel too comfortable to do this kind of violence in broad daylight, is no longer in that section.
So in your area, are you proposing having cameras that would cover all of the public areas in your district, or just in certain high crime areas?
Right, so right now we have a proposal on the table for 12 cameras. They would be located heavily along Natural Bridge, which is the main thoroughfare, where a lot of instances of violence and for instance, the hit and run incident, a lot of stuff happens on Natural Bridge. And then not only that, if violence happens somewhere else, those guys usually have to use Natural Bridge as an escape route. So you would get the best bang for your buck on Natural Bridge. Other areas on Lee Avenue, again, obviously a lot is going on Lee. This is also an area that I think people knowing that area is under surveillance would be helpful, because a lot of drug activity happens there. There are some well-known drug houses on that strip where people come from other places all around the region, in fact, to come get their drugs. And so by it being known that place is under surveillance, it's less likely that kids from West County or other side of the river will come here to get their drugs. And then the other areas are in O'Fallon Park and Fairground Park. Those are two areas that we want to bring more families to. We are investing some money into and turning those into two premier parks in the city, and we want families to feel safe to come there.
Should police officers be worried about increased use of cameras becoming an excuse to cut the police force and its funding?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think we don't have as many cops as we need in the city. We all think we need more cops. In my neighborhood, if you talk to people people who live in the community, they wish they had more police officers. I think we all would want to see that beat cop walk in the street. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to do that. The dirty little secret about our district is that we don't, at any given time, there's really only a handful of cops actually on duty patrolling, and most of what they do is just respond to violent calls. They don't really have that downtime to be patrolling. And so I think that these cameras hopefully will help supplement what we don't have, which is enough eyes on the street.
But couldn't someone make the argument that in allocating resources to an area, that allocating resources to an area that has cameras wouldn't need as many police, say as an area that didn't have cameras?
I think that might be true in another section of town, perhaps, that was dealing with, if maybe what you were trying to get was vandalism, and you saw a big decrease in vandalism once you install the cameras, maybe that could be the case. But what we're trying to catch are murders and violent folks. And it'd be great if somebody makes that case, because after we install the cameras, murder rate drops by 80%, then I'd like to have that argument. Unfortunately, I don't think the cameras are going to do it alone. It's going to take a while, and the cameras are just one of many tools we're going to use to try to make that a safer place.
Would officers be viewing the video footage live?
Yeah, so the technology that we're putting out to bid is actually one of the reasons it's taken so long is we're trying to do it the right way. There have been some cameras installed in other sections of town on a smaller basis. A lot of the cameras don't work. A lot of them are done in a way that really you can't get the high quality video images you need to be able to actually make an arrest. And so we're putting in high quality cameras that are wireless and that the video would be on the internet, where the officers either at the police station can access it, or in their cars with the laptops they have internet access. So literally a cop will be able to sit around the corner and monitor from the cameras drug activity going on, and then when they see something happen, swoop in.
So they would be on the scene, in effect, watching the video in
They
a car
could.
nearby.
They could, but then you have the added benefit is that one officer in his car can monitor 12 locations.
Okay. Why couldn't on-duty officers, other than what you suggest in terms of monitoring multiple areas, but why couldn't on-duty officers provide the surveillance needed, say, at a lower cost?
One, it wouldn't be at a lower cost. An officer, a trained St. Louis police officer, is a very expensive commodity, and that's one of the reasons I argue that we need to put every cop we have on the street. The second thing is that, as I said, we just don't have enough cops. Our district, which is one of the most violent districts, and has so many calls for service, these cops are constantly busy, just answering calls for service one after the other, to the point where there's so much calls for actual high priority calls that a lower priority call, say a burglar in my garage, may not get answered for an hour, and that's a problem. You know, a lot of the stuff that is just quality of life issues totally do not get addressed at all because we're so focused on the big stuff. You know, it's a state of emergency in some of the sections of our town, and we have to respond accordingly.
You mentioned that cooperation with police is a problem for your ward. Do you see the cameras as assisting in solving some of those issues?
Yeah, potentially. You know, there's any number of reasons why people don't cooperate with the police. Among the younger population, there's this no snitching policy. Unfortunately, it's prevalent among the youth. But then among the older population, there's just fear that that if an arrest isn't made, or if their call doesn't result in instantly this person being put away, they have to live next door to this person who is violent and doesn't really care about acting out. The other thing too is that a lot of folks have been burned before, where they call the police specifically saying, we do not want to leave our information, we want it to be anonymous, only to have the police come to their door, and from their perspective identify everybody on the block that they're the one that calls. And that makes a lot of seniors very afraid to call the police. I think the other reason too that folks don't cooperate with the police is because they feel like nothing is going to happen. That they have called before and no arrests have been made. It's difficult sometimes to make make arrests. As the senator can attest, under Missouri law now, even if you catch a young gang member on the street in his car with a gun, the cops have to give the gun right back because that's not illegal anymore, unless he has a felony, which is very frustrating for the police. So it's tough to make these arrests sometimes, and so after a while, folks get tired of calling. So what we hope is that with these cameras, we can increase the number of arrests, get some of these bad guys off the street, and make a noticeable impact to the point where people feel there is change happening, and I will now participate and try to make it even better.
Thank you. If I may, I'll ask you both what your position, I'll ask you Alderman French first, what your position on the red light cameras is, and then likewise you, Senator Lembke, what would your position be on the use of public surveillance cameras?
Right. I'm not a fan of red light cameras. I think that it's more of a revenue generator than it is about safety. I think that's the only explanation for why a ticket costs more when the camera catches you than when a cop catches you. I also agree that there are some constitutional issues. It seems that as the law is written right now, actually it takes one of my colleagues to say if they're ticketing the car, then the car should pay the ticket. So I think that is an issue. And the other problem I have too, from another perspective with the cameras, is that I've gone down there to the courthouse before, and what they do is have everybody lined up who got one of these red light cameras. They ask who has representation by a lawyer, and they move them all to the side, and then usually the prosecutor says, okay, you guys can go. And the folks that don't have representation are stuck paying the ticket, and that's a problem.
Well, I think it was John Adams that said that our Constitution was written for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate for the governance of any other. When I think about having a surveillance camera on every corner of every block, it saddens me first, and it makes me really think about what is the proper role of government. And if one of the proper roles of government is a peacekeeper and a protector against violence and to protect the citizens of our communities, then I think that what we need to determine is, again, what is the proper functions of good government, and what should we be using the people's money, the resources that we have, the alderman, mentioned we just don't have enough money to put a police officer on every corner in some of these tough neighborhoods. Well, I would just venture a guess that the reason we don't have enough money is because we're spending the people's money on improper roles, and roles that the government should not be involved in. And that's why we don't have the resources that we need for those proper roles of good government, which I believe in. So I wouldn't support surveillance cameras. I know they have them in other countries. I know that if you go to London, they're on every corner. But we're not London. We're the United States of America. We're the freest country. We are the most liberated people in the world, in history. And why in the world we want to give that away, I have no idea. So I think that what we need to address as a people is what and how are we going to spend the people's money on good government. And those are the things in the conversations we have to have. Jefferson and Madison were huge supporters of public education. And I think that we need to look at that. I mean, every politician says education is their #1 priority. But we've got schools that are failing our children and failing our families. So there's so many questions. I just don't hope that we take this leap into that the answer being that we put a camera up on every corner so that we can catch the bad guys that are putting us all in danger. I think that we need systemic change in what and how we do government.
Thank you. Thank you both. We'll take questions now from...
Yeah, first of all, I do not see any constitutional issue that you raised. I mean, putting cameras in public intersection, not the bathroom, not the women's locker room, public intersection, I don't see it. I mean, we're talking about less surveillance than Facebook. So, I don't see a constitutional issue. And furthermore, I think a lot of issues you raise, whether it's charging the one who runs a red light camera different than a police officer, and every issue you raise could be addressed by I am in the Frank Williamson's ward, addressed by the older person right here in the city. And I think this demonstrates by you addressing this issue, which should be addressed by the city, the county, and also municipalities, is instead of addressing these issues at the local level, people are running to just city if they don't like what's going on in the city. So
Can I respond to that? First of all, I think that we have to establish that my concern necessarily isn't that the camera is up there, it's that the camera is not identifying who the driver of the vehicle is when we're talking about red light cameras, okay? The surveillance cameras are a different issue, okay? The other thing is, there is a gross misunderstanding as far as local control is concerned, okay? If you go back and you study history, you'll see that, of course, the states were first, okay, not the federal government. The federal government is a creation of the states. Likewise, local governments are a creature and a creation of the states and are subject to the states. There is no guarantee, even for charter cities or charter counties, that they have the freedom beyond what freedom the state gives them. And I'll reference Article 6, Section 19A, the power of charter cities and how it's limited. Any city which adopts or has adopted a charter form of government shall have the powers which the General Assembly of the State of Missouri has the authority to confer upon any city, provided such powers are consistent with this Constitution and with the state, and are not limited or denied either by the charter or by state statute. State statute says what powers local charters and local cities have. The state is the hub, all right? And the powers delegated through the people to the federal government and to the local government come through the state.
If I can say one thing about that, just a quick statement. I would just say that my right as a resident of the city of St. Louis to be treated fairly under the laws of the state of Missouri don't come from the state of Missouri, as you said earlier. And my creator gave me those rights, and it is unfortunate that I think the state so often chooses to treat the citizens of the city of St. Louis differently from other places.
Well, if I overstated as far as where rights come from, I was talking about of governments, how governments are given, and governments aren't given rights, by the way. They're given and delegated power. Okay, people have rights. Governments are delegated power. Okay, by the people. Okay, and in a representative republic, as we live in, those that are elected on behalf of the people go down and make those decisions. Okay, so the state as an entity delegates power to the local municipalities as it sees fit, and if the people don't like what the state is doing, then the people throw those bums out of office and elect somebody else. Well, sure. Go ahead.
Question. I think your premise is just plain wrong when you say the states are the authority. The people give the authority to the local governments, and the local governments will then give that authority to the states, and that is the basis of the Constitution. The Constitution of this state was not the state prepared it either. The people went to a group and gave power to this entity and said, we give our power to the state. And it's not throw the bums out.
Not
just
through.
Just a minute. It's not throw the bums out. It's change the Constitution. And we do have that authority to change the Constitution if we don't like what the current Constitution says about classes of cities and these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the people, not the state tells us. We tell the state.
How do the people do that, sir?
Through referendums?
They can do it in the state of Missouri. Not in all states. They can do it in the state of Missouri through referendum or through the legislative process in Jefferson City. So you are correct, and I stand corrected, that you certainly have two ways of doing it. You can do it through referendum, or you do it through your elected representatives at the state level. But you don't change the state constitution, for instance, through your local representatives, correct?
No. That has to come for a vote to the people.
Right.
Changing the Constitution is the people's function.
Right, right.
Not the state's function. People.
Right,
So
right.
to me, to say the state is the big authority, that's just bothers me because, I think the federal government feels the same way. They've forgotten that, as you pointed out, the states gave them the authority to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to go on down 2 more levels to say, okay, that makes my point. One more thing that I would throw at you here is you make a big point of, well, we didn't identify the person committing the crime going through the light.
Right.
And I'm sure you've addressed this before, but I haven't heard you address it. The same is with a parking meter. We don't define, we don't know who parked in that parking place.
Right.
But we give them a ticket, people pay for it.
Right.
That seems to be all right, unless he can prove, hey, my car was stolen, and I was. So what's the difference?
Well, you have different, one is an infraction, one is considered a moving violation in state statute, okay? And the penalty for that is more severe. So that's my case in point. I mean,
more severe, huh?
Well, the idea that the penalty of losing your privilege to drive, in the state, is something that And the idea of addressing the spirit of the law again, as far as what the intent of the legislature was in having a point system to begin with. If we have dangerous drivers on a road, we want to address that. What's happening is the local municipalities are skating that by handling them as parking tickets. They're handling a moving violation as a parking ticket.
Take a question.
Actually, very brief statement regarding what you just said, and I'll ask my question to the alderman. They're handling it like a parking ticket, and I think the one thing that's been missed here is that the red light cameras and the speeding cameras they have in Illinois, they were talking about on 170, they are about making money for the municipalities. That is why you go up 170, you hit 15 different cops, because it's all about money. It's not about safety, it's about money. Maybe I'm just a complete cynic, but let's see, I'm an attorney, I handle traffic tickets, you call me, you pay me my 65 bucks, I send a letter to the prosecutor takes the speeding ticket. I recently had one doing 90 in a 55, no problem. Moves it to illegal parking and $325. Safety? There's no issue of safety. It is bogus, it is nonsense. It's a racket, I'm part of the racket. Thank you. You know? But it is a racket, it has nothing to do, but the cameras, and all due respect, Alderman, and I don't know what it's like to live in your district. I do know what it's like, well, not to live, but to very often be in Jennings and that area because I own a bunch of houses there, and I don't go up there without a gun. Sometimes it's there out. I mean, it's a rough area. Routinely crime. Yet I agree with the senator to have cameras there. I was recently in London. You mentioned London. There are cameras everywhere. I don't know about camera success in America. I do know because I, over the last year, read a bunch of articles that every time they add more areas to their blanket coverage of surveillance on the citizens of England, the more areas they add, funny thing, crime keeps going up. Now there's other factors. There's always other factors. But we take away, as the senator said, our liberty for the dubious possibility that crime will decrease. The moderator said maybe the crime shifts to another area. Maybe it shifts around the corner. Maybe it works and crime decreases, but is it worth it? With all due respect to the gentleman over here, he said, you know, it's a public place. Well, do we have the freedom to not be surveilled? That's a question. Do we have the freedom to not be surveilled?
Okay, so there are a few points there. One is, I think the constitutional questions have been answered several times about what rights to privacy you have in a public place. This has gone through the courts for years and years, and it's been ruled. Obviously, ask any celebrity who gets photographed getting coffee looking pretty bad that you don't have a right to privacy out on a public street. I can take a picture of you, I can put it in the paper. The second thing is that the issue of surveillance cameras is a cat that's out the bag. All right, there's cameras all over the city even right now. When you go to the mall, you are under surveillance. When you're driving through a red light, you're under surveillance. When you're down on the riverfront, you're under surveillance. And so what I'm suggesting now is that, great, we've got the Central West End covered, we got local business district covered. Now can we use the same things that they use in these relatively safe areas in the most violent sections of town? Can we use the same tools they're using? And in the question of other countries, you know, how we're doing it versus how other countries are doing it. One, the proposal we have is modest compared to what they have in London. We're not talking about a kind of camera on every street corner. But two, as the senator mentioned, this is America. We have liberty. We have freedom. This is also the area that we have some of the most violent crimes, the most murders of just about any industrialized Western nation. We have the highest percentage of people locked up in prison. Some sections of our country are rough places to live in. And for folks who, what I get resentful of sometimes is that no one, and I mean not one person from the 21st Ward has brought an issue of privacy to me. The issues of privacy and Big Brother, as it's called, always come from other folks who live in other areas that are safer than our section. The questions I get from the folks who live in the 21st Ward is not, are you going to be looking in my window, is where the hell are the cameras? You said they were coming 8 months ago. They want the cameras now.
Fair enough.
May I ask a follow-up to you? You mentioned that the courts have generally held that you don't have an expectation of privacy in a public area, and you also mentioned that you're hoping to get cameras that are very high-tech. Would the cameras that you're requesting have the capabilities to zoom, say, farther than the naked eye could perceive?
Yes, they will. And one of the privacy issues is that they have the ability to what is called like a sentinel, or like a guard. So they will zoom down the street like the guard is walking down the street. They will also, for privacy reasons, have the ability to block out houses, windows, things like that. So when you're looking at the video, all the house windows are all grayed out. So it's just surveilling the public area.
And do you think people have an expectation of privacy or an expectation of being seen in a public area to the extent that these cameras can view them?
Yes, the areas that they are monitoring are in public. So just as if an officer was in a car watching you walk down the street, an officer can sit around the corner and watch you walk down the street in the camera. They can't see anything more, anything less.
I would like to follow up with the Senator on the parking ticket analogy. I've lived in Creve Coeur. I believe that ordinance is actually written such that it is consistent with with parking ticket type of enforcement. In other words, the violation is to the owner because the vehicle went through. It doesn't matter if you just drove it through. It's like you have to have your safety inspection. You have to, have your license plate. You have to have the car not be going through a red light. No matter who drives it, it is written as the responsibility of the owner. Now, in that case, that'll allay some of your issues, and particularly if the fine for that type of infraction was lower than the fine for a moving violation with the officer witnessing it.
It doesn't alleviate my concern because, where are the logical conclusions? I mean, where does that take us? I mean, what's next then? I mean, and some people might think this is absurd as far as an example, but let's say I go out and legally purchase a firearm, and I've got that firearm in my vehicle or in my house, and my house is robbed, and someone steals a firearm and then goes out and commits a murder with it. Am I guilty of murder because somebody used something that I owned and broke the law with it? I mean, where will this take us if, again, I'm guilty until I prove my innocence when we're talking about this type of law breaking? To make the comparison to a parking ticket, I think that on the one end, we're saying, well, we do this with parking tickets. But again, if we give up this liberty in this area, and we say it's not necessary for the burden to be on the state, the burden is going to be on the individual to prove their innocence, not the state to prove my guilt. So I'm afraid where it takes us. We give an inch, believe me, they will take a mile.
Well, let me ask you on the other side of that coin then, if the camera was able to identify the individual, which you said would allay your fears, the Creve Coeur also has a seatbelt law. Would you then say that this camera should be able to simultaneously ticket that individual for violation of the seatbelt law?
Well, we don't have a primary seatbelt law in the state of Missouri.
Would you support that, by the way? It's a side issue. Great
No,
Floor has a
I haven't.
Great Floor has a primary seat.
Right, right. I haven't supported it in the 8 years I've been in the General Assembly, so no, I would not. But since you have that ordinance, that local ordinance,
Yeah.
then, and of course, like I said before, the state is silent on it in state statute, then sure. I mean, if you identify the driver, you know, and you have that ordinance, sure.
Okay.
Oh, I have a question for the Alderman French. Is there a concern about the possibility of vandals destroying or disabling the cameras, and what's the procedure there?
Yeah, that's a big concern, and in the bid that we put out, it would they would have a warranty on the cameras that the installer would replace, and hopefully it would install them in such a way that it would be tamper and vandalism resistant. But the other thing is that the benefit of putting the cameras, getting a wireless system like we do now, is that we're bidding out, is that when one camera goes down, the whole system doesn't go out, and the cameras will actually be watching the cameras. So hopefully you'll get a good shot of the guy who took the camera out.
I do have a question for the alderman, and it's just, I guess, in part about like the culture of St. Louis city government, and that is where does the authority and the responsibility really derive for public safety? Is it vested in the alderman? I mean, is that part of your charter responsibility to ensure that your ward has appropriate video surveillance? Or I guess my question is, you know, why would an elected official be taking the lead in something as important as, you know, ensuring the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of their district as opposed to the police department? Could you just speak to where the responsibility flows?
So, being elected just a year ago, the first thing I can tell you, my first experience or realization as an alderman, new alderman, was that if I don't do it, it won't get done. And unfortunately, it's probably a sad tale about, you know, the effectiveness of our city government, that there are all kinds of things, big and small, that if me and my staff don't do it, it won't get done. And that's actually, you know, why I ran. The person I beat was in there for 15 years, and a lot of stuff just did not get done. It's not new about the crime issues in our community, but these new ideas about how to fight crime, including, you know, big ideas like the cameras and small ideas about just organizing block units, are stuff that we're doing ourselves. It's not coming from any other office in City Hall. The police, to their credit, are doing as much as they can, but they are overburdened with the problem we have. Department of Public Safety, you know, everything is kind of, you know, the system is kind of complaint driven, and then after that, kind of alderman driven. And in the city of St. Louis, it's, you know, for good or bad, the city is one city divided 28 times. You know, and a lot of stuff falls upon us to do and initiate and push. I mean, it's not as easy as just saying, hey, we want some cameras, here's the money, we found it, okay, BPS, that's Water Public Service, or Department of Public Safety, get it done. Well, that doesn't happen. And so we have to push and push and push and push. And hopefully eventually we'll get these cameras. Hopefully eventually we'll have our goal of 100 organized block units. We started with just 14 about a year ago. We're at 60 now. And so that's what it takes to get it done.
Oh, sure.
For Alderman Antonio French, I'm wondering, what if 5 years down the line, these cameras haven't worked? What happens then? Is there a mechanism to say, okay, they haven't worked, we're going to cut the operating costs, we're going to go back to, you know, more men on the streets, or will we even be able to tell if they are or are not working?
So one is that I'm pretty confident it's going to help. I don't think at all that cameras, just installing the cameras, is going to solve the crime problem. That's not going to happen. These cameras are not going to be monitored 24 hours a day by police. They don't even have the manpower for that. What happens hopefully is that after a crime occurs, we'll be able to pull up some video and then use that as evidence to prosecute. But it's going to take a lot of other things to help bring the crime down. I'm confident though from some other cities that have used these things that it will help. There was an article just this week in the Denver paper about Denver installed cameras about 18 months ago. They've recorded 300 crimes and made 80 good arrests in the last 18 months. If we can get some numbers like that, that's going to help. Because what I know is that a lot of this stuff, as I keep saying, occurs from the same group of folks. And if we can get that group of folks away, get some good evidence on them, it's going to make a big impact, noticeable impact immediately. 10 murders kind of changes the whole attitude about a neighborhood. It changes behavior, it changes the attractiveness of moving there and playing and living there. If we can get that down, in half within a year, and maybe back to at least just the normal rate of another city neighborhood, it's going to make a huge impact in the quality of life for folks who live over there.
You mentioned reviewing, the police officers would be reviewing the camera footage for evidence, and you also said earlier that some of them would be viewing it live and streaming. Which is the sort of normative condition here? So
the video will always be there, and if an officer has a need to pull it up, they can pull it up live. What we know is that the police have not dedicated any individual to just sit there and watch the video all day. But it is a tool available if they need it. So if they know something is going on over here, they can make sure that officers are patrolling, pull the video up and watch it. But there's no one just dedicated 24 hours a day to watch this video.
If they're not watching it live, then the cameras don't aid then in bringing officers to the scene?
No, they will not aid. If nobody's watching it, then nobody knows to go to that scene immediately. But hopefully, with the, in conjunction with block units, in conjunction with people feeling more comfortable calling 911, sometimes it's easier to call 911 and then have an officer pull up the video. That they can do that quicker than actually sending officers over there sometimes. So that hopefully that will help. Again, the cameras alone are not going to solve it, but in conjunction with other crime fighting techniques, it's going to be an added tool.
I'm still putting my thoughts together on exactly how to phrase the question. It's going to be for the Alderman. It's an idea that might address one problem while raising a whole host of others. And that is, well, it goes to kind of the discomfort that I have with the idea of the police force monopolizing information. I think that while a majority of police officers are trustworthy, I think that there are some bad apples in the bunch. And I think that perhaps one way of kind of raising my level of comfort with the idea of surveillance cameras would be to ensure that the viewing of those feeds is not restricted to the police department, but rather people within their own communities might be able to watch a street. So perhaps a high-tech neighborhood watch option. So if the police aren't watching these feeds 24/7, the neighborhood can organize themselves to keep an eye on things, and then if they spot a problem, they have the opportunity to call 911, get the police involved. But of course, the problems that this would raise is that all of a sudden you've enabled people to snoop on each other. And I think that that's also a very real concern, and it's something that has to be taken into account when we're talking about the policy implications of this. But so my question is, has there been any consideration of making these surveillance feeds available for the public to view? And one point that I started to make and then didn't is that I think it also addresses the possibility or the threat of tampering with evidence. The possibility that someone could take a video that was shot, adjust it in some way to incriminate somebody who wasn't actually involved in something. We know with technology there are a lot of things that you can do now with recordings. And so I think that if you've got the possibility of a half dozen eyes on the same thing, there's a lower risk of somebody manipulating evidence to obtain a result that they might prefer. Does that make sense?
I hear you. So a couple things. One, the way the system would actually work is that the city is paying for the installation of the cameras. We do that through our capital improvement fund. The actual recording hard drive, the DVR, the big TiVo, will sit at our office on Natural Bridge, our ward office, which is our TMAP office, our Targeted Management Assistance Program. That's where we have 2 people in the office full-time that folks call already every day about nuisance properties, situations like that. It would be big things like drug houses to small things like houses needing to be boarded up. So that will actually be there. So it's not at downtown at the police station, it's here. That's where it's being recorded. The second thing is that I have talked to Chief Isom, and actually one of his suggestions, because they don't have the resources to just dedicate an officer to just sit and watch this stuff all day, he actually brought up having some citizens, those who have been trained and go through the Police Citizens Academy program, which they do every year. Those who have been trained to know what to look for, police procedures, how to, what kind of characteristics to report when they call 911, to let them have access to it, not to the whole system, again, to like limited cameras. So maybe the one on their block unit. That part would still be worked out, but the idea is that, yeah, making it more of an open source system is good for everybody, because you would like to have some live eyes watching the camera. The police don't have the resources to do it, so if we can turn some of that over on a limited basis to our TMAP specialists in our neighborhood, and then also some trained block unit captains, I think that'd be a good idea.
I'd like to address the alderman just a minute. From what you indicated, it seems like this is going forward. It's a good project. It's a goal project. Who's paying for this now? I see you're an alderman there, so you're from the city of St. Louis. Is the city sort of funding this as a test project? And it sounds like a great project to me, and I'm all in favor of it. But just wondering, did they do this for you?
No. So each ward gets a certain amount of capital improvement money. That's to deal with capital improvement, streets, new lights, whatever.
Pork, huh?
Yeah, but not pork actually. It actually goes to do this question earlier, is that a lot of the responsibility for what goes on in the city falls upon us directly. So when you're getting a street paved, it's not City Hall doing it. The 21st Ward has its own pot of money, and if the 21st Ward runs out of money, your street isn't getting paid. And that's how it works. And so, as I said, I took over from a 14-year incumbent who had not done very much. The city, our ward had not gotten its service in a long time. As a consequence of that, our fund has built up. So we have more money than other wards. And so that's how I'm paying for it, out of our fund. Not other wards are not blessed with a big account like this, and so it's probably going to be about a $300,000 project.
You've got no kicks from the city then of you going in this, like you're taking away their citizens' rights. And I understood you say your citizens in the ward are happy that you're doing this, but no other complaints about you're taking away my liberties or their liberties, like I'm hearing here?
No, not at all. And if you're talking about like from the mayor's office or something, we haven't gotten any feedback either way.
Good. Well, congratulations.
Any further questions?
Well, I guess again, I want to make this point again. I guess in a different way. There's surveillance on public transportation, public schools and university, public library. I could go on, you can name some more for me as well. But even the police cars. But when it's talking about surveillance being on a public intersection, think about Brockwood. We have a debate. We have a Senate move against it. I'm just trying to figure out what sets the other public surveillance apart from surveilling a public intersection, and why couldn't, like, in public highways, public university, public transportation that is controlled by local officials, metro, the UNCL, the same with public library, why couldn't the city control the public cameras in the public intersection?
I think the reason that it's been treated differently is because I've been very public about what we're doing. I've been letting it be known, especially after we have an instance of violence, that this is one of the things we're going to do. All these other cameras that have been installed in the city have just been done. Nobody let anybody know what's going to happen, and in many cases, section of the town you go to, you still don't know you're under surveillance. It just happened, and so that's also one of the reasons that sometimes things are done quietly, because when you do it quietly, there is no kickback, no pressure against it. But I think it's important for folks to know that it's coming and to have this debate. It's a good debate to have.
One more question?
I have a response to him. Just an example, if you have a camera, let's say, in a mall or a library, people are not going to steal. If you have the red light camera in an intersection like it happened to me, somebody's behind me revving their engine, tailgating me, they're going to cross on a red light. I don't want to get killed, and somebody's behind me, putting me at risk. I cross. The picture that comes in the mail has the front of the car behind me covering half of my license plate. I'm paying the ticket. So I said, do you want me to stop and get pushed in the middle of the intersection and get killed? So I think there's cameras for certain places, like in a high crime area, fine. I'm not a criminal because I ran a red light. I don't do it on purpose. So I just think there's different issues at work between, do you have to have it there for safety, or do you have it there to make money and to get people who are not criminals in trouble? And that's how I see it.
I hope we don't come to a place where in using these surveillance cameras that the police officer that's on that beat that gets to look at the tape of this surveillance, and there was, let's say, a petty larceny or something, a break into an automobile to steal some CDs or something like that, and the individual was caught from behind, and they had that same cardinal jacket and that same cardinal hat that Joe Smith wears every day. Every day he's out on the street, he's got that same cardinal hat and that same cardinal jacket on. And we know we've identified Joe Smith because Joe Smith always wears that same cardinal hat and same cardinal jacket, okay? And they bring him in and they start going over it with Joe Smith as far as, did you break into this car? This is all about identifying who the person is. We wouldn't stand for that if it was that crime that supposedly was committed by Joe Smith. So why do we stand for it when a license plate of the owner of a vehicle is identified, but we don't identify who's driving the vehicle? Why do we stand for it? We shouldn't.
Misidentification happens all the time. It's honestly, like, if I were to identify, let's say... And
does that person get their day in court?
Yeah, they get their day in court.
Okay.
And sometimes the police even go further by letting the person go. You misidentify the wrong Joe Smith with the wrong, with the right jacket and the right. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we might have been confusing the issues there. I think maybe some of those points apply to the red light cameras because you're saying that folks in general sometimes don't get their day in court. But I think with the surveillance cameras, though, as you said, that would be no different than if a police officer was sitting across the street and he saw Joe Blow in a red T-shirt or whatever. Sometimes that happens, and the answer to that is usually their day in court. But just so we all know, America has the best judicial system if you can afford it. So what it usually comes down to is having, a good lawyer in both cases, whether it's something you get caught doing on a surveillance camera or something you get caught doing on the red light camera. If you got a good attorney, and if you don't,
Yeah.
it's not the same system.
Maybe next week we'll be discussing the Arizona immigration law.
Oh.
Oh, no.
So I want to especially thank Audrey Spalding for her hard work in organizing this event, and also to Alderman French. I'll send my thanks to you, and also to you, Senator Lembke, and all of you for attending. Thank you all.